Tonight, Bookmark comes live from Stationers' Hall in the City of London for the presentation of Britain's most important literary prize, the 1983 Booker Mcconnell Award for Literature. There are 6 shortlisted books. Shame, a historical fantasy by Salman Rushdie.
Waterland, Graham Swift's Fenland mystery story.
Life and Times of Michael Kay, set in South Africa by J.M. Curtsey.
The Illusionist by Anita Mason, about a first-century magician.
Flying to Nowhere, a mystical thriller by John Fuller.
And Rates of Exchange, Malcolm Bradbury's East-West comedy.
Well, a very good evening to you from Selina Scott and me at Stationers' Hall in the City of London, and for this month's edition of Bookmark. Our entire programme tonight is devoted to just a single event, the award of the 1983 Booker Mcconnell Prize for Fiction. The prize is only 15 years old, yet it's become established as perhaps the most important in the English-speaking world. Indeed, it came as a fine compliment to Booker that one of its recent winners, William Golding, won this year's Nobel Prize for Literature. So all this glitter and the money prize, this £10,000 cheque, is manifestly not the only reason for Booker's importance. We should know the name of the winner, which will be announced here live in about, about 45 minutes' time.
Well, in the hall is a who's who of publishing and 5 very special and most probably very nervous people, the shortlisted authors. Well, we'll be interviewing all of them during the programme and showing dramatised extracts from their books. Now, J.M. Curtsey, who can't be here tonight, has talked to us on film. I'll also be speaking to the judges about their decisions, to a publisher on what it means in financial terms to win, and to last year's winner on the difference it makes to the lonely art of writing.
And we begin with an author who's won before 2 years ago, Salman Rushdie. The novel the judges have been considering is Shame.
The country in this story is not Pakistan, or not quite. There are 2 countries, real and fictional, occupying the same space, or almost the same space. My story, my fictional country, exist like myself at a slight angle to reality.
Shame is a historical fantasy about a third world country torn apart by violence and political upheaval. It deals with the bloody rise to power of 2 wealthy families. One is headed by Iskander Harappa, loosely based on the executed President Bhutto. The other is led by Raza Hyder, a thrusting career soldier who resembles Pakistan's current ruler, General Zia. But Rushdie isn't merely writing about power politics.
I think what he's saying is that when human beings stop feeling shame for their actions, something terrible has to remind them that there is such a thing as the feeling of shame. I mean, it's a notion that has been constant throughout human history, but there are times when the behavior of people in power seems to be shameless, and I think that, in very general terms, is what he's saying in this book.
Imagine shame as a liquid. Let's say a sweet fizzy drink stored in a vending machine. Push the right button and a cup plops down under a pissing stream of the fluid. How to push the button? Nothing to it. Tell a lie, sleep with a white boy, get born the wrong sex.
It's almost Shakespearean. If you think of Shakespeare's tragedies, you'd find that Shakespeare's heroes complain that the natural order has been disrupted. And the sense of shame is the sense of disruption of the natural order of human morals.
The symbol of this disruption is Sophia Zenobia, Raza Hyder's mad daughter, married to a man she cannot love. Shame builds up inside her until she becomes like a violent beast.
A beast is born. A wrong miracle within the citadels of propriety and decorum. To comprehend Sophia Zenobia would be to shatter, as if it were crystal, these people's sense of themselves. And so, of course, they would not do it, did not, not for years. The more powerful the beast became, the greater grew the efforts to deny its very being.
If Salman has a political message in it, surely he means that Sufia Zenobia, as representative of the people of Pakistan, will break through with a kind of rage that tears heads and eats guts.
Something coming up the stairs. He heard it roar. He stood beside the bed and waited for her like a bridegroom on his wedding night. Then she rose up on her hind legs with her forepaws outstretched, and he had just enough time to say,
"Well, wife, here you are, at last."
His wife's hands reached out to him and closed. His body was falling away from her, a headless drunk. And then the explosion comes.
For all the pessimism in the book, you read it page by page and enjoy the quality of the writing.
It's going to introduce you to a world which you will recognize as the world of your own dreams and nightmares. It's fiction at its best.
Well, Salman Rushdie, the tragic brain-damaged figure of Sufia Zenobia is said by many critics to represent your view of Pakistan. Is that fair?
I think it's not so much that, as that she took over the book, really, and I think what happens sometimes is that the writer becomes governed by the people you invent, you know, and I thought having invented a figure of nemesis like her, that I had to let her have her way, really. I'm not quite sure what she means. I'm not sure that she's anything as simple as a figure of the masses in Pakistan. She might be.
You regard Pakistan as a tragic entity, presumably?
It's a tragedy which takes the form of a farce, yes.
Has the book been published in Pakistan? Is it likely to be? How's it going to be received?
Well, what's interesting, you see, is that no, it's not there. I mean, well, it is there, but it's not there on purpose. It's there by means other than legitimate. However, the thing that's interesting is that it is being reviewed there. Now, I think this is quite revealing, because a year ago, I think it would not have been reviewed there. And I mean, if one can pretend for a moment that we are present in the real world, you know, rather than the media, then the fact that people are reviewing the book means that General Zia is on his last legs, and this is a good thing.
How much longer would you give General Zia, would you think?
Well, I'd give it 12 months.
Another 12 months. If you win tonight, you'll be in this extraordinary position of being the only person ever to have won twice.
Yes.
How, I mean, you're going to become such a media figure. If
I don't expect to be in this position.
If you do, however, hypothetically, I mean, is it going to spoil, do you think, all the adulation, all the admiration you're going to get, you're writing your next book?
I expect to have one or two friends left tomorrow morning.
Salman Rushdie, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, the second book is Waterland by Graham Swift, a mystery story of obsession, madness and murder in the Norfolk Fens. Waterland is also a history lesson, and we, the readers, are the pupils in the classroom, sharing the troubled memories of a history teacher who is reliving his murky childhood.
We lived in a fairy tale place, in a lockkeeper's cottage by a river in the middle of the Fens, far away from the wide world. And no one needs telling that the land in that part of the world is flat. Flat with an unrelieved and monotonous flatness. Enough in itself, some might say, to drive a man to unquiet thoughts. To live in the Fens is to receive strong doses of reality. The great flat monotony of reality, the wide empty space of reality. Melancholia and self-murder are not unknown in the Fens. Heavy drinking, madness and sudden acts of violence are not uncommon. How do you acquire in a flat country the tonic of elevated feelings? Children. Children who inherit the world. Children before whom I have stood for 32 years in order to unravel the mysteries of the past, but before whom I am to stand no longer. Listen one last time to your history teacher. You should know, because it was you who were witness to the fact that old Cricky, your history teacher, had already, in one sense, and of his own accord, ceased to teach history. In the middle of explaining how, with a Parisian bloodletting, our modern world began, he breaks off and starts telling stories. These stories. Something about living by a river. Something about a father who trapped eels and a drowned body. And when a body floats into a lock kept by a lock keeper of my father's disposition, it is not an accident, but a curse. I was late for my rendezvous because, in a word, Freddie Parr was dead.
He's dead, Mary. He's dead. Right there on the towpath. I saw him.
Well, did anyone say anything? I mean, your dad or the police?
Say what?
About how Freddie died?
He drowned.
I know that, but how did he drown?
He fell in the river. Couldn't swim, could he?
The schoolboy game. Act innocent, you'll be innocent. Act ignorant, people will think you don't know.
Freddie didn't just fall. Somebody made him fall in.
And that same evening, after I'd cycled back from my tryst with Mary, because she and I had one of those youthful things going, which, though youthful, are not always innocent, and which, though they happen in your youth, can affect the rest of your life. Something else floated down the Leam, seen and fished out only by me. And we know what Tom did. He weighed evidence, put facts together, fished a bottle. It's got serious. He's someone who teaches mistakes. While others say, here's how you do it, he says, and here's what goes wrong. While others say, this is the way, this is the path, he says, and here are a few bungles, blotches, blunders, and fiascos. He's an obstructive instructor, a treacherous tutor. Maybe he is a bad influence, and maybe he's not good to have around.
Now, Graham, you weren't born or brought up in the Fens, so why did you choose to set your novel there?
Well, I actually have the greatest difficulty convincing people that I wasn't born in a cottage in the Fens. I chose it, I think, because it's one of the most unpromising landscapes that I know, and I wanted to make something out of it.
You catalogue a really bizarre set of events which you in your short lifetime could not possibly have experienced. I wonder how valid it is for a young novelist to write about them.
Well, again, it's another hard thing to convince people that books are not, on the whole, or novels are not generated from the author's own experience. They are created, they are invented, they are discovered. They are not simulations of what is familiar.
Did you set off with a firm plan in your mind about your novel, or did you just set off and write and find the novel running away with you?
I think it did run away with me on many occasions. It took 3 years to write, and if something takes 3 years, then the chances are that there are going to be all kinds of weird eventualities in the course of that time.
Now, if you win the Booker Prize, there is the honour and the glory, and there is the cash. Which is the more important to you?
I would welcome the cash.
Can I ask you a little nervous at the moment?
Who wouldn't be?
We'll keep fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Graham Swift. Well, last year's winner was Thomas Keneally with Schindler's Ark, a novel set in Nazi-occupied Poland. He'd already been shortlisted before with 3 other books, but 1982 saw the triumph of his literary ambitions. Or were they ambitions? Did you actually want the prize? Did you have it as a burning ambition?
Well, I would have had it more as a burning ambition if I'd known it was on the cards. I didn't think it was on the cards last year because of the controversy about whether fact could be turned into a novel.
What was your year like? I mean, it must in a way have been a bit like becoming Miss World, as it were.
It was. I've got a sense of being here to hand back the golden bra or jockstrap or whatever. And it was a delightful year because the Booker, unlike or like few other English language literary prizes, does have an enormous effect on the success of a book. If the book is going to be successful, it makes the success happen quicker, more quickly.
Was it an irksome year, would you say, or did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it immensely. It's something that, no matter what critics might say of you in the future, that it can be put on your headstone. It's something no one can ever take away.
And Schindler's List looks like being made into a film by Steven Spielberg now.
That's right.
Is it going to be a good film, do you think?
I do hope so. Steven Spielberg is Jewish and of Central European descent and has the right tribal credentials to make it into a good movie. I do hope so.
Best of luck with it. Well, Thomas Keneally, thank you very much indeed.
And now the third book is Life and Times of Michael K. by J.M. Coetzee. Now, Mr. Coetzee is South African and somewhat shy. In fact, he finds discussing his work very difficult indeed, and he asked if he could be excused the ordeal of travelling the 8,000 miles here to London to face his admiring readers. So we went instead to see him. Life and Times of Michael K. is set in South Africa and begins here in Cape Town, where its author J.M. Coetzee was born, and where he is Professor of General Literature at the University of Cape Town. In his fourth novel, Coetzee looks through the eyes of Michael K., a gardener, passive and simple, adrift in a strife-torn future.
The story is that he was picked up all by himself in the middle of nowhere in the Karoo, running a staging post for guerrillas operating out of the mountains, caching arms and growing food, though obviously not eating it. When he was brought in, he had a brown paper packet, which he put away under his pillow. Now he's taken to holding the packet against his chest. He passes through these institutions and camps and hospitals and God knows where else like a stone through the intestines of the war. An unbearing, unborn creature.
In the book, of course, Michael K. isn't black or white. It's one of the problems of this country that before you can buy a ticket to get into a train or go into a cinema or get married, you have to ask yourself, am I black or am I white? Any book which does something to remedy that kind of preconception of the self seems to me to be doing something. Anna Kay and her son huddled quiet as mice in their room beneath the stairs, not stirring even when they smelled the smoke, even when heavy boots stamped past and a hand rattled the locked door. Michael sat with his ears pricked, staring at the strip of grey light under the door, breathing very quietly. When his mother began to snore, he gripped her shoulder to make her stop.
Your mother passed away during the night. We did what we could to keep her, but she was very weak.
Do you want to make a phone call?
This was evidently a code for something. He did not know what. He shook his head. He tore a black strip from the lining of his mother's coat and pinned it round his arm. He did not miss her, he found, except insofar as he had missed her all his life. The book is set in South Africa sometime in the near future, perhaps in the late 1980s, I don't know. It's a time of low-level civil strife. Buses aren't running. It's difficult to get hold of food. There isn't always food in the shops. Civil order is breaking down. Conditions are very difficult. It's a hypothetical future. I don't know whether that is actually what the future is going to be, but it seems to me a realistic projection of what the future might hold. On a shelf in the shed, he had found a packet of pumpkin seeds. He still had the mealy kernels, and on the pantry floor he had even picked up a solitary bean. He planted a small patch of pumpkins and a small patch of mealies and some distance away, he planted his bean so that if it grew, it could climb into the thorn trees. As he tended the seeds and watched and waited for the earth to bear food, his own need for food grew slighter and slighter. Hunger was a sensation he did not feel and barely remembered. If he ate, eating what he could find, it was because he had not yet shaken off the belief that bodies that do not eat die. Everything that one writes, it seems to me, in South Africa nowadays has a political aspect. If it doesn't have a political content, the absence of that political content is a political aspect. But it also seems to me that a novel is a way of saying an extremely complex and subtle thing, if one wants to be complex and subtle.
If they'd made me practice the story of my life every day, standing over me with a cane till I could perform without stumbling, I might have known how to please them. I would have told the story of a life passed in prisons, where I stood day after day, year after year, with my forehead pressed to the wire, gazing into the distance, dreaming of experiences I would never have, and where the guards called me names and kicked my backside and sent me off to scrub the floor. Whereas the truth is that I have been a gardener, first for the council, later for myself. And gardeners spend their time with their noses to the ground. The truth about me. I'm a gardener.
On the other hand, was it not strange for a gardener to be sleeping in a closet within sound of the beating of the waves of the sea?
Book, Life and Times of Michael K. by J.M. Curtsey. And now I'm joined by Faye Weldon, who chaired the panel of judges and is the lady with a £10,000 secret in her head. You're not going to give a thing away at the moment, are you? What was the panel of judges looking for?
Well, of course it's difficult to say. Judging books is very much like judging people or individuals, almost impossible to do. I suppose you could say we were looking for excellence aligned with purpose, or literary merit which somehow managed to express the truth, express both of those things. Beyond that, it's almost impossible to say. We're looking not quite for the best book, but for the book best fitted to win the Booker Prize, which is, I suppose, a book of literary merit.
You've obviously got the winner there.
Yes.
Was it a unanimous decision?
Shall we say it was a consensus?
Ah, now you're falling into this little trap, which everyone is saying it's going to be a compromise book.
No, certainly not, certainly not. No, I think it is easy to fall into that trap, but I think we took great pains not to, and I do think we have arrived at the correct decision.
Now, you had 100 books to read.
Yes.
Did you read all of them?
Of course I did. Yes.
How can you choose? I'm pleased to hear that. How can you choose the one that adequately reflects the best of literature, though?
I think that's almost impossible to answer. How indeed? You do the best you can. You hope that the sum of the wisdom of the judges is greater than the sum of its parts, shall we say. You hope that as a panel you do what as an individual you cannot possibly do. You're receptive to other people's opinions, other people's enthusiasms, other people's hates. That is really the best you can do. And I think that this we have really adequately reflected.
Very well done. Thank you very much for a moment.
Faye Weldon. Now, novel number 4, one of 6 pared down from 100 entries. Anita Mason's The Illusionist. The Illusionist is set in the Bible lands in the 1st century AD. It deals with the early Christian church and tells the fictional story of Simon Magus, a Samaritan magician who appears briefly in the New Testament.
But there was a certain man called Simon, which before time in the same city used sorcery, and bewitched the people of Samaria, giving out that himself was some great one.
A story about the 1st century. Politics and philosophy, history and myth, heresy and faith, miracles and... magic. And about 2 men. One, the illusionist, Simon Magus. Showman, sorcerer of Samaria. Simon could fly, summon up visions, open caves up in mountains. A clever man. And 2, Kepha, otherwise known as St. Peter. Simple man of faith, apostle and Jew. The founder of his sect could raise the dead, heal the sick, and produce food for 5,000 people. Do you know the difference between magic and miracles? No? Neither did Simon.
How did you do it?
Do what? Have an olive. They're really very good.
Call down a spirit on 100 people. I've never seen anything like it.
No, I don't suppose you would have done. How do I call down the spirit? I really don't know how I do it. I was promised that I'd be able to do it, and I can. What you saw yesterday wasn't a magical trick, you know.
The invocation of a spirit is never a trick.
I beg your pardon, I don't know much about magic.
But your master was a magician.
Of course he wasn't.
Is turning water into wine not magic? It's almost the first thing in the textbooks.
That was a miracle.
What's the difference?
When one of us does it, he's invoking the power of God, and that is a miracle. When someone else does it, he's aided by demons, and that is magic.
And when Simon saw that through laying on of the apostles' hands the Holy Ghost was given, he offered them money, saying, "Give me also this power."
Money. Money. You think you can buy the gift of God? Why, you insolent piece of Satan. Fit to be one of us, you're not fit to clean our privies. Here, take your money. Take it to damnation with you.
Disdaining sanctity and abandoned by his power, the man once known as Simon Magus joined the ranks of the vagabond sages. He travelled the roads of Judea and Samaria, preaching.
The gods are phantasms. The Creator is a murderous despot. The divinities, the true divinities, are men and women.
Do you know the difference between heresy and faith? Peter did.
The sorcerer must be stopped.
He follows Simon to Rome and challenges him to a debate.
It is time for the truth to be told.
And then a contest. A magic contest to the death in the name of love and God. And when Simon is defeated, he becomes one of the first casualties of an infant religion which uses the means of persecution to the end of survival.
Anita Mason, the notes I have about you say that you're not particularly interested in religion, you're not a religious person, and yet this is a very religious book. It must have taken an enormous amount of research. How long did it take?
It took about 2.5 years, including the research. I'm not a religious person, but I am interested in religion. I'd like to pick that up.
What about, I mean, you started presumably with the Bible. I gather you read that from cover to cover.
I had to read all of it, yes. It takes about 10 days, should you be interested.
Yes.
That's in a modern version. The authorised version takes a bit longer to get through. I read the New Testament, I suppose, about 5 times.
What other sources did you turn to?
I can't remember.
There's an absolute
there
wealth
were so many.
One of the things that I find curious is that you disguise some of the characters, like Jesus, for instance, and St. Peter, using their Aramaic names. Now, what was the reason for that?
That's not a disguise. There were a number of reasons for that. The Aramaic names were the names they had. Jesus is Greek. Peter is Latin. They would not have been known by those names. It helped it's very difficult when you're writing about something which is in a sense so familiar to people to get behind the familiarity. You have to get rid of the familiarity if you're going to show them something fresh. So you have to get rid of familiar names. And it helped me to think about it as well.
Do you think the book is going to offend established churchmen, if you like?
I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Because it certainly doesn't pull its punches. I mean, you don't come out as a very great fan of established religion, do you? Certainly not Christian religion.
I'm not a fan of established religion, no. I think something happens to religion when it gets established.
So what do you think is the answer then? That we should all have our own personal, internal religion?
I don't know. This is an imperfect world, and that's one of the paradoxes of it.
What about magic and miracles? You're fascinated with that.
I was interested in the way, at the time this book was written, this book is set, 1st century, there was no difference between miracles and magic. The same words were used for the same things. The Christian church took over magic and called it miracle and outlawed magic. I found that interesting. And of course it was because the Christian church worked magic that it got converts.
Anita Mason, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, one of the people who's been watching the proceedings with special interest tonight is Tom Mashley. He's the chairman of Jonathan Cape, one of the publishers of a shortlisted book. Now, to the writer, it's worth £10,000. Can you put a figure on what it's worth to the publishers?
No, I can't, and I wouldn't want to, because as far as I'm concerned, although obviously the money from the writer's point of view, as from the publishers, is important, what this prize is really about is reaching a large audience so that a large number of people can have the experience of reading a book that the judges have recommended and have thought worthwhile. And hopefully that people will be stimulated by this work. I mean, that is what we're interested in.
But that means a lot of money for the publishers as well, and you're getting neatly out of it by not mentioning any figures.
All right, well, I'll give you a few statistics. I mean, publishers always lie, but I'll try to tell the truth. Midnight's Children, probably without the prize, would have sold about 4,000 copies. In fact, it sold about 40,000 copies. That is the last time, Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children is the last time a book of ours won the prize, and it's the figures that I know to be accurate. Well, you can figure out that's quite a lot of copies. But I do emphasize that is not the prime purpose of it.
Many people, of course, say it is simply a hype, it is a sales gimmick, and that is all it is these days.
Well, this is what always happens, you see, when the media get hold of something, and when it works, and there's no doubt that the Booker Prize has been a great success in terms of stimulating interest, in terms of its very purpose. Well, its purpose is to recommend to the public one, and then a short list of 5 other books that are thought to be, by the judges, books of excellence. I cannot think of a more worthwhile project, and, you know, the moment it works, it is labelled hype, which is absurd.
How much lobbying did you do to make sure that your writer got the nomination?
None whatsoever. I mean, there is absolutely no way. I do know, personally, 4 of the 5 judges, but, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you know, you wouldn't. In fact, I can actually say that I haven't spoken to them about it.
You look such an honest fellow,
people are laughing, but it's so. No, it's counterproductive, because their business is to resist. I mean, it's unthinkable that anybody would push their own right.
Well, let me ask you, you're chairman of Jonathan Cape. You're also a betting man, obviously. Who do you think the winner's going to be?
Well, I naturally hope that Salman Rushdie will win it with shame. And I haven't read the other books. From what I've seen, I have reason to believe that that is actually the best book. However, if the judges were to decide that because he won it a couple of years ago, and they won't admit to this prejudice, they don't wish to give it to him, I think probably the next book is Coetzee's book.
I see. Tom Ashley, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Tom Mashley. Now, the 5th novel is a brief mystical thriller, Flying to Nowhere, by John Fuller. It's a beautifully produced book from one of Britain's growing number of small publishing houses, in this case, Salamander Press of Edinburgh.
The body was like a house, whose single inhabitant might be impossible at any one time to find.
John Fuller's first novel, set in the Middle Ages, is a fable about the dangers of science and superstition. On a remote island lives an abbot whose obsession is the precise location of the human soul within the body. The local bishop dispatches a bureaucratic churchman to investigate this phenomenon. The abbot is determined the stranger shall not discover his secrets.
The abbot couldn't sleep. This staircase was one that he hardly ever used, being a narrow circular one of stone. He did not understand how the stairs continued so long, or where they might lead. And yet he still felt in pursuit of something, and the not finding it sent him scurrying down the next staircase in the general direction of the parts of the house he knew. Was the soul, he wondered, like this, a stranger in its own house? Perhaps he was still not properly awake. On and on he went, faster and faster and faster and faster. The dissecting chamber was well enough out of the way. He sometimes couldn't find it himself in the mazes of the house. Whatever lay casually in his study that the stranger's eye might rest on, a forbidden monograph or a gland in a little dish brought from the chamber for longer reflection upon its secret properties, these the abbot intended that morning to hide away. What indeed was life? It was not the body. Was it after all simply the spirit whose location his long researches were designed to establish? The body was like a house whose single inhabitant might be impossible at any one time to find. You could move from room to room, even on one floor, or around a single stairwell, and be forever entering the chamber just vacated by the object of your pursuit. And what was this object? The abbot had for a long time pursued it, but he could not say what it was. He dissected each part to understand its working. But finally, each organ, each bone, each sustaining mechanism of tissue was revealed as little more than an empty room in a house that seemed to grow larger the more familiar you became with it.
Well, John Fuller, you're best known, I think it's fair to say, as a poet. How different, how difficult indeed is it to write a novel as you've just done?
Well, a lot of my poetry recently has been fictional, and I believe very strongly that poetry can be fictional, as well as being personal or lyrical or whatever anybody expects it to be. So I don't think the transition was as difficult as you're suggesting.
As all that. I mean, it is very short, and yet I must say I got the feeling from it that the economy of the words, each one has been very carefully honed. Every single one matters. There's no self-indulgence at all. I mean, is that right, would you say?
I kept it around for a long time. It was long in conception. I wrote it fairly quickly, but I think I had calculated the effects beforehand.
How long ago did you decide to write it?
About 1977.
And what indeed gave you the idea?
About 1981.
Had you been to Bardsey Island or somewhere like that?
Well, I have a cottage in Wales, and I know Bardsey. So a lot of the local landscape, I think, gets into the story. But most of it is out of my head, obviously, and there's not very much research either.
Now, you teach English. You're a Don at, I think, Magdalen College, Oxford, are you not? How do you think generally the prize, this prize, the Booker Prize, how do you think it affects the standard of writing in this country?
Well, I don't suppose it affects it at all, really. I think it may affect people's interest in
I think there must be some people that hope it does affect and bring up the standard of writing of novels.
I think it will enormously increase people's interest in books. I don't know quite what effect that will have on the way people write them. I think they will go on writing them as they've always written them.
John Fuller, thank you very much indeed.
The last of the 6 shortlisted books, described as a satirical comedy of East-West relations, Malcolm Bradbury's Rates of Exchange. Bradbury sets his book in the imaginary East European state of Slaka. Now, the Slakan people are a mysterious lot, much given to intrigue, bugging and blackmail. It's a dangerous place to visit, especially for an unsuspecting English professor called Dr. Petworth. He soon finds himself enjoying the company of the enigmatic novelist Katia Princip.
So, Mr. Petworth, I have brought you home. I have really liked meeting you. Did you like meeting me?
Very much.
Well, if you don't have me, you have my book. Perhaps you will have me much more this way than if we decided to be silly and go upstairs and make some love. Now, I think you go in your room.
Come up for a minute.
You do not understand. They will notice here. They watch everyone. Oh, Mr. Petworth, you are really not a character in the world historical sense. You come from a little island with water all around. When we fought and died and were occupied and oppressed, you had Queen Victoria and Alfred the Lord Tennyson. You never had history, just some customs. Now, you go upstairs, you enjoy our country, and you make some good lectures, please.
Summing up very neatly much of what Malcolm Bradbury's excellent novel is about. The great divide between East and West. Our innocence against their experience. Our frivolity against their earnestness. Our rather hazy individualism against their collective zeal. Even personal contact behind the Iron Curtain is somehow shadowed by history. And Bradbury shows, wittily, and I think with a lot of good comic detail, how his hero travels hopefully, but never spiritually arrives.
Sometimes I'm a writer. Sometimes I drive a tram.
Really? That's amazing.
Yes. Here, if they do not like what you write, they let you drive a tram. Do you try at all our sex in Slaka? In Slaka, sex is just politics with the clothes off. Do you believe we meet again? Or do you go home soon and forget all about me?
Oh, no.
Of course, we have made a nice exchange. Each one gives the other something. All so simple. But they will not last long, not like history. Oh, I know you are not character in world historical sense. I try to make you better. But I think I am a thing that happens to you once in a foreign country, not part of your true life. Oh, my dear, excuse me. But in my country, after an event, we are making always an analysis.
So, Bradbury's innocent abroad is seduced by the wicked witch of the East, the linguistics professor by the magical realist novelist. Not for nothing is the book called Rates of Exchange, since it's actually about the exchange of words, ideas, emotions, bodies. But in the end, Bradbury suggests, with wonderfully comic pessimism, that East is East and West is West, and that though the twain may mate, they never finally meet.
Of course, it is very fantastical. Not real at all, but you see, I am not believing in reality.
You don't believe in it?
No. I have tried it and I'm not believing it. You see, Petush, reality is what happens when you listen to other people's stories, not your own. The stories are becoming a country, the country becoming a prison, and the prison is becoming your mind.
Well, fancy meeting you here, Malcolm Bradbury. The last time I saw you was about 11 years ago, when you used to lecture me on the 19th century novel.
I did, yeah. I hope you figured it all out in the end.
I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yes, well, I enjoyed every minute of teaching you.
I'm pleased you did. It's my turn now, of course, to quiz you on your book. And I'd like to know, firstly, how much of your own personality went into creating the character we've just seen in bed there with Katya Princep.
Yes, well, of course, he has no personality at all. The whole rule of the book is that he's not a character in the world historical sense. You know, he has no real nature, which I suppose is a projection of myself. I think that there is something passive in me, which is actually the passivity of the writer. That one of the things that is good about writers is that they don't actually want to rule the world. They just want to see how other people rule the world,
and lie back and see other people's stories and then be sceptical about them. I'm the world's greatest skeptic.
So, Dr. Petworth, isn't then simply a dig at your academic colleagues who lead perhaps fairly cloistered and limited lives?
Well, there's something of that. But there's also this primary idea that he's a kind of receiver. He listens to what other people say about the world. What Mrs. Thatcher, the monetarists say about the world in Britain, what Eastern European leaders say about reality in Eastern Europe. And he doesn't believe in any of it. He just listens, and he simply studies language. He listens to the way they talk about it, and I think this is what novelists should do. You see, the great thing about a novelist is that he listens to all this talk about reality, all the lies that becomes truths, all the argument, the fictions that become the real. And what he remembers is that there is fiction. And so, so far as he is a sort of novelist in the book, and he is, he's like me.
See. Well, like you, if you win the Booker Prize, what will you spend the £10,000 on?
Well, it's very difficult to answer because I think the £10,000 is not the most important thing about this prize. I think what I believe is that it's not a prize about money, that it's a prize about seriousness.
Yes.
I'd like to believe that.
I'll have to stop you, I think,
right.
because we're going on now, I think, to the announcement. Thank you, Malcolm Bradbury. Thank you.
Malcolm Bradbury. Well, now we've reached the climax of the evening when literature comes face to face with stardust. The announcement of the winner of the Booker Mcconnell Award for Fiction for 1983. And here's Faye Weldon to tell us the decision.
And the book which wins the Booker Prize this year is The Life and Times of Michael K. by J.M. Coetzee. Thank you.
So the winner of this year's Booker Mcconnell Prize for Fiction is J.M. Curtsey with The Life and Times of Michael J., a story set in South Africa. As we said earlier, he isn't with us tonight, so instead the award will be accepted by Tom Rosenthal, Chairman and Managing Director of Secker and Warburg.
Tom Rosenthal, who accepts the cheque. Thank you very much. And the book. Thank you very much.
Well, as you know, J.M. Coetzee couldn't come to London tonight, but we did speak to him about the possibility of this triumph. As we said before, he's a self-effacing man, rather shy.
Well, I can't claim to have had exactly a wide readership in Britain hitherto. Winning the prize, I think, would be wonderful. I couldn't imagine a more wonderful accolade. But one must remember that the writer one gives the prize to, by the time one gives him the prize, is very likely in the throes of the next book and going through the familiar round of self-doubt, wondering how he's ever going to reproduce that magic, convinced that he's a fake.
Can I ask you what you think of the choice?
I think it's excellent, and I'm very glad that we have something rather different from previous years.
Let me turn now to this gentleman here. Have you read this book?
Yes, I have.
Life and Times of Michael K. What do you think of it?
I think it's a very worthy winner, and I'm glad that it helps to sort of expand the view of fiction in general.
I see, thank you very much. And we move round to here. Madam, can I ask you what you think of the choice of the winner?
I was one of the judges. Does that exclude me from this?
I'm sorry about that. What's your name?
Angela Carter.
Hello. Yes, tell me, what do you think?
It's a very powerful and impressive novel.
Was it your choice?
You shouldn't ask a question like that.
Why not? Why not?
Ask Clay, because we have a consensus.
I see. All right, Angela, thank you. You weren't a judge?
No, I was not.
Good.
No.
Did you read the book?
No, this is one I have not read.
I see, so I'm going to leave you then, sitting there.
You must indeed.
Can I ask you, sir, did you read the book?
Yes, I did.
What did you think of the choice of the winner?
I thought
then?
it was a natural compromise winner.
A natural compromise? Why a compromise?
Because he had everything going for it. Because it was written by a South African, and if the judges were divided on other things, then they could perhaps give it to a South African dissident writer.
Do you agree with that?
I think it was the best book. There were only two potential winners, which was Salman Rushdie or this one. And I would perhaps have gone for Salman Rushdie, but very worthy winner.
Thank you, everyone, very much indeed for your thoughts and comments.
Well, that's it for this edition of Bookmark. J.M. Coetzee is £10,000 better off, and we'd like to think the whole world of writing and reading have yet again been modestly enriched by the decisions taken here this evening. I'll be back again with you next month on Tuesday, the 22nd of November, but from Selina Scott and from me, a very good night.